And we're live. And today I'm joined by Sam Adams. He's a men's coach based in England, and he helps men reconnect with their wild and authentic selves, um, rewilding practices, addressing trauma. Yeah, so much to get into. Really looking forward to getting to know you more, Sam. So welcome.
Thank you, Justin. It's great to be here. Hello, if you're listening live, and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah. So I guess I want to start our conversation just asking you a little bit about like how did you get into the coaching work that you do today?
It's a personal journey where my own healing, my own wounds, my own challenges I had to face head on. And in that process, discovered some tools, some frameworks, some, let me say, treasure maps on the journey of life that I love. They've helped me so much. So then I've just turned that into something I could offer others that might be of use to a broader audience.
Wow, treasure maps. That's cool. I might have
Yeah.
to use that sometime. That's great. And so I want to share kind of my experience of getting to know you and your work. This might sound weird, but if I was like a Hollywood producer and I was making a film and I wanted to have a character that was like a men's coach, but with like a full-on art department and wardrobe expert, I would base that character on you.
Yeah.
I think you bring a real sense of aesthetics and a real sense of artisticness
Hmm.
to what you're doing, and that's something I really appreciate about you.
Mm.
And have you always just kind of been like that, where you give things style, a sense of presentation, or are you surprised to hear that? Or
Thank you. It feels nice to hear that. It's
okay,
uh,
great.
it's not surprising as much as it would have been in the past, and I think the story underneath what you've just shared is one of my externality starting to match more my internal.
Mm,
For years, it didn't match. I looked like your average guy. I was
really?
working a corporate job. I was married with two kids. I had short hair and wore average clothes. I didn't have any tattoos, and I was a church goer. So I was quite a nice guy,
Mm,
inoffensive, certainly on the outside. And the more I've done this healing work and discovered these treasure maps, the more my body has wanted to change shape.
interesting.
So the
That makes
aesthetic is
sense.
catching up, right? And it's not just because this is what coaches look like or because it's trendy. Surely some of it's informed by that, but it's more as I listen to my muscles, as I listen to my hair. It said grow your hair long. It said grow your beard. Um, it said get tattoos, but specific tattoos in specific places. So it has been a dance with my physical embodied self to listen and then respond, take care, change some of my clothes. Um, yeah, I'm still working it out, but I like to wear this body suit, this flesh suit, and it feels good.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense as you say that, because I know that rewilding is how you put it, and getting back into nature, and you're creating really beautiful content in these super epic locations out in the wild. And
Mm,
so I guess expressing that wildness and that liberation is
mm.
maybe a bit of what's going into the
Yeah,
presentation.
it is. It's this representation of what's within comes on the outside. Wild for me is a metaphor of freedom and stepping away from that neat, defined version of what it means to be an adult, particularly a man, in a, let's say, capitalist Western way. So you need to show
Mhm.
up like this and be, well, for me, I was conflict avoidant. So I didn't
Mhm.
want to look offensive. I didn't want to cause any ruffles. And that's a collective wound, but it was also because I grew up in a home full of conflict. So I
Mm.
chose to play small. I think many men
Mm.
can relate to that. I chose to be a nice guy. Um, and now I've healed some of that, integrated some of that, got to know the inner archetypes of those things I've mentioned, then there's a bit more freedom, liberty to wear whatever I want.
Mm,
That's my wish for the people I work with, is this treasure map doesn't all go to the same treasure. It goes to your own unique version of treasure. There's
nice.
not just one way to be a man. There's this infinite way to be a man. And so this treasure map is a unique journey, a unique path to help him discover his gold, to
Nice.
fight his dragons along the way, to overcome obstacles, to navigate junctions, and to choose things each moment that are right and authentic for him.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, I think there's a bit of a warrior vibe
Mm,
to some of the kind of the style, and this idea of the finding the inner gold. I mean, as I'm listening to that, I'm thinking about like what is my inner gold? I would say it's kind of peace of mind, joy, and it can be very elusive to, and no matter how much I achieve in life, or how many exotic locations I go to, or how many kind of things I check off my bucket list, I still feel like I'm kind of in this perpetual pursuit of kind of feeling okay, just being at peace. I think
mm.
that to me is the gold. But I suppose maybe different men that you work with have a little bit of a different idea of what the gold is to them.
Yeah, because it is shared, but it's also unique, as I said. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I think the gold that we all need is self-love.
Self-love, yeah.
But what is in the way of getting there is unique, and how it shows up. So my gold might have a different shape to your gold. Of course it will. And that's what
Yeah.
makes it special and unique. And that, if we look at the chakra system, it's that solar plexus, that golden light that lives in the middle of each of us, that seed of divinity that I believe we all carry.
Hmm.
And we're going to shine that light. But
Yeah.
often, because of our trauma, dragons have formed on the outside of that cave to hide it, to guard it.
Wow.
And this
Yeah.
journey includes a process of dealing face on with those dragons or monsters, those demons within. And I like to say befriending them, learning to ride the dragon like Daenerys Targaryen rather than killing them. And I think I'm jumping into mythology here. If we look at myths around dragon slaying, often they were forced upon our collective knowledge by a Christian narrative that the dragon is the snake from the Garden of Eden, that we should get rid of it. It represents evil. And I
Mm,
got a different take on it, that it represents things that are in the shadow, they're hidden. And
mm.
actually, we need to get them out. And maybe the dragon wants to come down to the village and share some cake with the villagers.
Nice. I
That's,
heard.
I'm
I heard.
thinking about a children's book that I read to my children where actually there's a dragon who's just lonely. He wants
Yeah.
to come down, have some cake.
Nice. Yeah, because we could be maybe we're just scared of them, but maybe they just want to be friends. I heard something about dragons a while ago. I'm trying to remember it, but this idea that they represent the four elements. The scales represent water. I think they breathe fire, which represents the fire. Maybe they have wings, which represent the air. And
Mm.
are you familiar with this idea? I'm kind of grasping, but I thought it was.
Yeah, and they live underground in the cave, so that's the fourth element.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And whether they existed or not in the past, whether there's some sort of mythological evolution and play on dinosaurs, it's curious that dragons are this universal image from Chinese culture
I
to
was just
Nordic
thinking that.
culture and all over the world. It
Mm.
represents so much, and it's fascinating that there's a universal mythology that includes them.
Yeah, it's mind blowing that they're part of Chinese traditions as well as European traditions, completely different parts of the world. Which, as far as we know, I don't think there was any kind of cultural exchange until much, much, much later. So it just
Mm,
kind of popped up in their creativity, I suppose.
yeah. I don't know for sure. I'm not an expert in that type of lineage. There obviously was some cross pollination, But the way dragons are seen and drawn, they're quite different artistic styles and roles. I think in the East, we notice, for example, is it this year's the year of the dragon? And there's an embrace of serpent energy, the Kundalini and the dragon in the East, whereas in the West, in the Christianized West, the dragon, the snake, is blamed for tricking Eve and
Mm-hmm.
causing the fall of man.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a pilgrimage to Italy last Easter and exploring some of my Italian roots and noticed all of these dragons made of metalwork across this town in central Italy. And I thought, wow, I know of the dragon in North Europe and China, but here it is in South Europe on the Mediterranean. So that was a whole new world for me there on the Mediterranean, and wonderful stories. And just to finish that fantastic anecdote, on the way back to the airport, I'd Googled dragon to see what was there. And there was a cathedral. And it said, in our crypt, there's a dragon bone.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I thought, what a fantastic opportunity to go see it. And there's a beautiful church building. I forget the name of the town, central Italy. Explored the church, couldn't find anywhere, found some secret steps to a hidden door, opened it. There's a whole other layer underneath. It was amazing. And then in one corner, there's a glass cabinet, 3 or 4 meters long, with a rib bone, and archaeologists saying, we found this, we don't know what species it belongs to, could it be a dragon?
And so this single bone was the full length of it, like 3, 4 meters long.
Yeah.
That's a that's an enormous bone.
Yeah, maybe I exaggerate, it was at least 2 meters, two and a
Yeah,
half.
like over the like larger than the size of a human.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. I had an experience back in September or October where this butterfly flies into my kitchen and was just hanging around. And the first day or two, I was just like, "Oh, it'll fly out the back door when it wants." And it was just it wasn't going anywhere, and I was like, "Oh, this is strange." And then I was out walking, and I saw, well, actually, I saw a pizza delivery kid on a motorcycle, like suddenly stop and almost hit another guy on a bicycle because he was so distracted. And he's like, "Whoa, look at that!" And we found this really big by Mexico. I was in Mexico at the time. This really big dead snake on the ground.
Mm.
And so I was feeling like, because we can get carried away maybe with reading the symbolism that's coming into our experience of life, but I believe in that, and I found it was interesting, this blend of this butterfly and this gigantic snake coming into my life at the same time.
Mm.
And I saw them both as symbols of transformation, because the butterfly, of course, it starts off as a caterpillar, and then it transforms and it gets its wings and becomes this beautiful thing that flies away. And then the snake is like it sheds its skin and becomes renewed.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's how I'd read into it. And I do give a lot of time and attention to these signs that come from wildlife and trees and the seasons as they enter our paths. Can
Hmm.
only, I can't doubt anymore that there's serendipity in it.
Absolutely. It's a subjective thing. It's something that nobody can really point out to us because nobody else has our perspective.
Mm.
So it's kind of up to us to recognize and interpret. And a lot of people don't really notice it, but also I feel like sometimes I have more or less of this experience where sometimes I feel like life is truly magical and alive and full of synchronicity and incredible coincidences that really defy any kind of probability. And then other times I feel like there's just not that much of that kind of magical zest happening in my life. Maybe it's when we're more on the path, or
Hmm.
like more, you know what I'm saying? Or I don't know, or maybe it just kind of comes in spurts, or maybe I don't notice it as much sometimes as other times.
Yeah. I believe life's a journey and we're on this path, and I compare it to when I'm walking through the forest. Sometimes the path is just obvious. Just
Hmm.
keep going. There isn't any obstacle or decision to make, or there's no cue, there's no external cue. So you just keep going, one foot in front of the other. Just relax,
Yeah.
flow, breathe. It's lovely. And then a change comes along. There's a fork in the path. I don't know which way to go. Or
Hmm.
suddenly there's a bank of weeds, brambles, nettles. There's a block. And I remember when I was a younger man feeling anxious in those moments in the forest.
Hmm.
Even recently, when I've been leading a client through the forest and thinking, oh no, we're both lost. What are we going to do? But the practice I've learned to develop is pause. That's the time to look for the signs.
Yeah.
Come back to the present moment. The flow has stopped. I can't control that.
Hmm.
There's an obstacle here. So that could be an illness, a divorce, a relationship challenge. There's a death. There's a bankruptcy, a redundancy, or an opportunity. There's a new question to make, a new partner on the scene, you fall pregnant. So in that moment, the most essential thing for us to do is pause.
Hmm.
Wow, the scenario, the landscape has changed. Let me take stock. So when I'm there in the forest and in real life, take a breath, have a look around. And in that moment, there's nearly always a gift. In fact, I'll say there's always a gift.
Hmm.
There's always a gift. And a new
Yeah.
path becomes clear, which I wouldn't have seen before if I hadn't paused. Ah, look, actually, it's almost like the forest opens, life opens and says, this is the way to go.
Yeah.
This is the way to go. Follow me. Oh, and I can relax. And many times the gift has been literal, where in that moment I've paused, I've looked around, and there's been this beautiful uh, ecological special gift. Like I found a skull once, or I found an old bee's nest, and I thought, wow, this is something I wouldn't have seen if I just kept walking.
Yeah. It makes me think about how those times when you're just walking the path and you can just kind of enjoy the scenery, but there's no doubt about the path is the path. You just keep going, and that's nice. But if that's all there was to it, it would get kind of boring after a while.
Mm,
We kind of need those moments of confusion or uncertainty or changes to to make life interesting and meaningful. And we can sometimes struggle with those moments, but if we can approach it with resilience and trust, then that's what really makes life rich and meaningful and interesting. Is those
mm,
moments of a little bit of chaos gets introduced, or a little bit of unknown and
yeah,
newness. And yeah,
yeah. They're certainly inevitable. That is the way that things flow, and we don't have a choice. There is change.
yeah,
Change is the one constant.
yeah. So when you're with your clients, I follow you through your content, these beautiful videos and photos that you create. Whereabouts are you? Like in out in the woods in England somewhere?
Mm. Yeah, we're in the UK, in the south of the UK, and I love to look for interesting, ecologically rich, or let me say wild places. It's hard to find the wild in this country, and having grown
Mm,
up in southern Africa, I know what vast wildness is that you find in many countries, but here in Northern Europe, it's a luxury,
there's not so
and
much of it left.
we have to we have to settle for just smaller smaller versions of that, but they're
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
And it's about leaning in with the depth and the history and the richness and the metaphor. So where do we go? I take people to ancient places. That's something we have that I feel very grateful for. There are stories that are from prehistoric times here, Recently, my winter program has been about darkness, about surrender, about facing death, and then choosing life.
Whoa.
We've explored depression, we've explored suicide, we've explored just the value of pausing and resting. So where have I taken the men? We've gone underground. We've gone deep into ancient quarries or 5,000-year-old burial chambers, and we've sat in the place of death.
Wow.
We've prayed, we've listened, we have connected essentially with the soil, with the coldness, with the darkness, very viscerally. It's a great place to live. There's a lot around here, a lot of ancient places, stone circles. I could go on.
I'm sure. And me being from Canada, I I when I think about Europe, I think it like there's just so much history there. Of course, there's history in North America as well, but it's a lot of it because the people that lived here before Europeans came here, they were so kind of one with nature or whatever. There's not the remnants in the way that there is in Europe, where they were building things thousands of years ago or many hundreds of years ago. And so I'm just amazed at the vastness of the history there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm cautious to comment on what you've shared as a white man and not from your continent there. What I can say is that I know there's lineages of landscape, and as a white Northern European, it is deeply personal to connect with these stories of these lands. And maybe
Yeah.
some of your white listeners here would relate to that if they don't live in the place of the ancestors.
Yeah,
So for
that's
me, I find going to these ancient sites, particularly the tombs, there's an accessibility that comes easily for me to just sit there and say hello and have a silent, prayerful conversation with the ghosts, with the spirits, and
mhm.
say, "This is me. I'm Sam Adams. I'm of this lineage. Maybe you knew my ancestors."
Yeah.
And of course, if we go back far enough, we all share the same ancestor, but this is my soil. That's what I'm getting to. This is my home. This is where my DNA is from past lives and millennia.
Yeah, I think that's as you say that that really resonates with me. I feel like that's kind of where my ancestors come from, and I my grandfather did our family tree, and so I know that he traced us back to Scotland and Iceland, and on my other side, Norway and Germany, and they've my family's been in Canada for like 150 years, but I still feel a connection to there. And actually, this conversation is making me really want to spend some time there and
Mm,
feel that energy in those places.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I'd like to ask you about the treasure maps. Like, it's just getting out into spending time in these incredible locations with the intentions that you're bringing
Mm,
to these moments. I'm sure is very powerful, but there's much more to your work, right? There's you have your methodologies. I would say probably that the treasure maps. I'd love to hear more about how you kind of approach the healing process or the process of transformation that you take your clients on.
mm. Thanks, Justin. I think the first answer to that is exploring why is a map needed in the first place. And my premise is that modern man is lost.
Mm,
So, what does a lost person need? They need a map to find their
nice.
way to the treasure, which is really to get home to oneself, to get home to one's self love, to one's gold.
Hmm.
Men are lost. There's a sense of confusion, I think, at that identity level for us as men, maybe globally. I think there's a lot to be answered for from the past systems that we see dying around us that are called the patriarchy, these systems of male dominated leadership it's like masculinity without the temperance of femininity. It's men without doing things without consent, taking and exploiting and extracting. So as a man, I grew up unconsciously feeling shame around that inheritance. There's a
Mm.
legacy that is shameful. It is shameful. It's disgusting what many of our forefathers have done and collectively did. So why would I stand in masculinity if it's associated with that toxicity? So then what happened to me, and I think to many of us, is we choose the opposite pole, which is to be flaccid,
Mm.
to be
Hmm.
soft, to avoid power, to become the nice guy. And
Yeah.
that is endemic. And I would judge it just as lacking, just as harmful as the despots, the tyrannical people. We got two
Wow.
choices: to inflate into tyranny or to deflate into this flaccid nice guy. Those are
Hmm.
the two common choices if we're not consciously healing and addressing it and doing this type of personal growth work. So the third choice then emerges, which is finding one's way to being in a healthy, balanced state of one's own masculinity and one's own femininity.
Hmm.
And that's the solution to the patriarchy, is bringing back the role of the feminine to temper and love and nurture and cherish and challenge the masculine.
Wow. Yeah. What came to mind to me is that we are responsible for our actions, or there are consequences to our actions, or but also our non-actions. And so
Mm,
by acting out in a harmful, negative way is bad, but by just staying on the sidelines and not participating because we're too enlightened, we think we're too enlightened or something like that, and we're just not getting involved. Well, that's also avoiding our responsibility and letting people down, and
mhm.
people are being hurt because of that.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, the third way is to acknowledge who we are. We have a role to play in the world, to be present, to express our our intentions, our nature, to really live life to the fullest, but in a not in an overbearing way, not abusing or misusing our power. And so you were saying bringing in tempering with the feminine, and I think that happens on the individual level, like
Hmm.
the microcosm or whatever, with our relationship to ourselves, who we are, as well as the group. And that could be in the form of um, community, how our communities of men and women structured and relating to each other, and organizing themselves, as well as how we are living our lives, and how we're perceiving our own identity, and how we our process of kind of making decisions and approaching the world and relating to other people.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in this topic, a lot of different factors. And the question is often why? Why the masculine pole? If it is so easy for men to dominate and the masculine to take without consent, then why not just become a nice guy? Why not just be that kind, flaccid, inoffensive guy?
When you say it's easy, do you mean it unless you're very careful that can happen, or we
I'm
can
looking
do?
for a reason to motivate change and find that third way.
Mhm.
I'm looking for the driver. What is the reason? Because once someone finds their why, then the actions follow.
Mhm.
And why is masculinity needed? That's the question that I think is really powerful and exciting to answer, and
Mhm.
edgy as well, because it's been so badly implemented and modeled. Why is masculinity needed? So we understand femininity is needed. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It feels so nurturing. It's the space of nurture and hope and reincarnation and mystery and faith and cyclical nature. She shows up in diversity and abundance and so much richness and strength. I mean, I've only just started there. It's a hard thing to define feminine, but what I
Hmm.
do know is that it's inherently beautiful.
Hmm.
So the masculine's got a different nature to it, and the question is, why have the masculine? And the answer I've come to is service. Service. Why find this third way? If you go too far, you dominate. If you go too far the other way, the masculine is absent. He's the absent father. Some of us can relate to that wound. Either the dad's abusive and aggressive and too much, too controlling, or the dad is absent. What's the third way? It's about service. I am here, I am present, and I am in service. I stand as a witness to you, my children, my partner, my friends and family, my tribe, and I'm a man present in my body with my heart, present with all of the physical qualities I carry as a unique man, with my strength, with my testosterone. How can I serve?
Service.
This
Wow.
is the shape of masculinity that I'm passionate about. Maybe there'll be different answers, and I'm open to that richness of answer. But if I had to choose one word, one adjective, it's serving. As a divine masculine, healthy masculine, as a king among kings, let me serve all in my kingdom.
Hmm. I think the word service can be interpreted in different ways, and probably some people might hear it in a way that is different than you intend it to be. And
Yeah,
I think service doesn't necessarily mean trying to trying to understand what the people around you want and satisfying their requests. I think it can still be very much leadership and seeing a picture that is beyond what maybe the children around you are capable of, and they like doing what's in everyone's best interest, although they might get a little bit upset because they don't understand, they're not capable of understanding things on the level that we are as an adult, you know. So I think there's a difference between I would like kind of le- l- leadership service as opposed to kind of like people pleasing
yeah,
and
that's
being
really important.
a doormat.
Yeah, yeah, and thank you. That is a part of the nuance of this. That all three things I've outlined can look like service. So the tyrant thinks he's serving, but he's doing it without consent. He hasn't asked permission. He hasn't checked in. What do people need? He thinks he knows best, so it can show up as arrogance. The flaccid, nice guy is serving from a place of essentially the victim, and he's just trying to people please, avoid conflict, and is a bit of a doormat, as you said. That was me for a long time. But
Hmm.
the third way is I know who I am, and I'm secure in that. I don't need to do anything to make me feel good enough. So it's from a place of self-love and abundance. I've overcome the dragons. I've found my gold, and it's that gold so valuable. I want to use it to serve others,
Yeah, and I think it
to bless others as well, Justin. I'll just throw in that word as
to
I want
bless
to
others.
bless. I want to bless. I
Yeah,
want to bless. I want to bless. Um, and I do it from a place of personal consent. I choose to bless, not it's choosing me, and I can't help myself.
I think there's a component to it around like borders or boundaries or perimeters, something like that, where we're creating containment in a way. And I know some people are really critical of this type of thinking, saying that there's no place for this in modern society. But this idea of protecting the perimeter of the group, the community, or whatever, as well as when you really love somebody, that doesn't that can sometimes mean pushing back on them because they have chaos, and sometimes they get a little bit out of control, and creating that structure for them, that where they can we can help them manage their own craziness. I think that's part of
Hmm.
that masculine leadership service as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm showing you my latest tattoo, which is a straight line here on my left hand. I've
Yeah.
got the circle on my other hand.
I was thinking about asking you about that. I noticed that
Yeah.
earlier, so I'm
So
glad
the
you brought it up.
circle is for me the shape of the feminine. It's beautiful. It's the womb. It's the cycle of each month. It's the moon, and then the straight line is the masculine that can compartmentalize and have singular focus. It's a
Yeah.
boundary, right?
Yeah, boundary, yeah.
It's a boundary that can at worst divide and conquer,
Yeah.
but at best it can just create safety.
Yeah. It can get things done. It's got
Yeah,
direction. Yeah.
that's right. So boundaries are essential and on the journey to what we just talked about. So I feel like what we were saying back then was about defining the why. And as a man, what do I want to get to? I want to get to a place where I feel empowered to serve without being attached to serving. Like I feel good enough in myself that I can just, from the abundance of my heart, I can bless and serve.
I like
How we
that.
get
Yeah.
there, how we get there is going to be a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's perhaps a lifelong journey for us to become that really transcendent king who can give and bless freely.
Yeah.
And boundaries is a critical part. So on my treasure map that I offer my clients, we explore boundaries connected to the element of fire.
Mm.
So you described the dragon as all four elements, and that's really great because I work with the elements. And the fire of the dragon and fire in general is representative metaphorically of boundaries. The heat,
Okay.
the heat to say yes, the heat to say no. It's about passion, it's about nourishment. My fire can be used to destroy or to cook a meal. So to
Mhm.
have training in fire management that I can manage my fire, I have the power to punch you in the face and I choose not
Mhm.
to. I have the
Mhm.
power to um, enter a space and cause disruption and I choose not to, or I choose
Yeah.
to, whatever is required. So I know my yes, I know my no, and I stand in that power as in a mindful way.
Wow. It makes me think of anger because it's natural for us to describe anger as like fiery. I think it makes sense to us.
Mm,
And anger can be an incredible fuel an incredible call to action for us, like nothing else. Like if anger was just completely absent from our mind body system, and let's say um, our home was being invaded or something like that, um, we would not spring into action in this nearly the same manner that we're kind of wired and designed to do.
mm,
But we get this kind of this whole emotional mental uh, sequence of events that calls us to action, with our mind and our body come alive, and we do what we need to do, and we're fueled by that, and we're able to tap into levels of strength that otherwise we would not we would think or we're not capable of. And so it's kind of a beautiful thing, and that's kind of calling upon that fire when we need it, because as much as living in a permanently peaceful utopia sounds nice, the reality is that there's this friction in the world. And that's kind of like, it's kind of like a violin. The beautiful music happens when you rub the bow across the string, and it's that friction that's what creates the beautiful music. And we're continually finding ourselves in moments of conflict in life, and
yeah.
that's okay,
Mm.
depending on if we're equipped to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about friction. Friction makes fire.
Friction. Wow. Right. Friction
Talk
makes
about the
fire.
bow. There's actually a method, the bow drill method, to make fire.
Yeah.
So I grew up thinking anger was wrong.
Yeah.
I whitewashed it, or put it in a basket, threw it out. That's the phrase I'm thinking of. I threw it out, saying
Hmm.
anger is evil. And
Hmm.
it cost me, because it meant I threw out boundaries, and I threw out a holy righteousness, um, that my yes means yes and my no means no. So I became a bit of a nice guy, like I said, and a pushover at worst.
Yeah.
Um, so if I'd had a healthier relationship with fire, with boundaries, I would have said no to certain things in my
Hmm.
young years.
Hmm.
And I would have said yes to others, and they would have been beautiful things. So I missed out. And I think that goes with this epidemic of nice guyness. A lot of us don't know how to be with fire. We don't know how to be in that potent, erect masculinity, that penetrative force that burns hot with romance or passion or pursuing one's dreams, that instinctive hunter archetypes. Like, I'm going to go and get this with consent, with prayer, with an open heartedness, but my eye is on the prize. I'm focused, dedicated, singular focus. That's my
Yeah.
fire. It's like
Yeah.
jet fuel behind me. I'm going for it.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna hunt the prize, and I'm gonna bring it home to nourish my family. That's how the fire's gonna provide and bless and cook. Or there's a threat coming rather than an opportunity. There's a invader. My fire's gonna send me there, and I'm gonna say no. No to this thing at school for my kids. No to this thing in my healthcare plan. No to this extra charge on the bill at the end of a meal. Like, to stand up and say no, really equally important.
Those are really, really great examples of things that we encounter all the time.
Mm,
And I can relate to a lot of that story of rejecting anger, thinking it was evil or I didn't want to have anything to do with it, and being a nice guy, and then wanting to be more true to myself, but being concerned about if I'm putting my foot down or if I'm maybe being confrontational or like is it being miscalibrated, am I miscalibrated because I see people who I my interpretation is there it's a guy who believes that they're kind of like expressing their truth and being real and being strong, but they're coming across as just a total asshole. And so I've had moments of where it feels right to me to express myself, this is not okay. But then I wonder like like am I actually in the right here or am I being a jerk?
mhm,
I sometimes I have moments where it's a little bit hard to navigate that.
mm,
Like how aggressive should I be if I feel like I'm being wronged? Or
mhm,
should I just avoid this situation? Or should I meet it full on or should I attack? Like it's kind of unclear to me
mhm.
sometimes.
Yeah, it's part of how we learn to work with fire. I think often an untrained man will just burn everything, and he'll burn himself in the process. For example, at that restaurant, it gets out of hand. You said this, I thought it was that price. And then there's a disgusting argument, and the management's there, and your family leave a happy meal in a place of real pain. It's changed the
Hmm.
whole energy. What's required is discernment. And that's the metaphor of walking through the forest. There's an obstacle here. The invoice is the bill for the meal is wrong. Take a breath. What do I choose to do? My child is tired and crying. We just need to get out of here. I'm going to just pay. It's not much. My child's my priority.
Hmm.
Or it's a romantic evening. I have enough money. I just want to focus on my partner. And it's not a fight I want to make.
Hmm.
Or maybe you've got time, you're regulated, you're feeling relaxed, you've taken a breath and say, hey, I want to fight this fight.
Hmm.
And then to hold that fire and to say, hello, in a calm way.
Hmm.
Fire doesn't have to be all explosive like fireworks. There's a calm way of communicating our fire and saying, this isn't what I expected. Can we discuss this? I'm not happy.
Hmm.
And then keep going. But with
Yeah.
that calmness, otherwise a man's out of control. And that's not a healthy relationship to fire.
Yeah. And there's a degree which we all agree would be too much. Like maybe you flip over the table and you say, I'm never coming back here again. How dare you? Like there's a point where it's obviously too much, but if like, let's say they say, oh, no, 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 you did actually order that other dessert that you're saying you did. Like it can be a little bit unclear to navigate sometimes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dramatics of turning over the table might be warranted if the attention isn't being given appropriately. So
Yeah.
there's a famous story of Jesus turning over the tables that were used for trading in the holy places. That's written down timelessly in a book thousands of years old.
Hmm.
So he got the attention of countless people.
Hmm.
But would I do that in a restaurant? I don't think so, unless the manager's blindsided, has blinkers on, and I need to cause a fuss. That's a
Hmm.
pretty extreme example to do something so radical. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, how do you? I'd love to hear more about like how you explore the fire in your one-on-ones or your group sessions. You mentioned that I know you've done a lot of beautiful group experiences, and lately you've been working with clients one-on-one. And if you're with a client and you're out in nature and you're exploring fire, what does that look like? If you could share a little bit about that.
Mm. Yeah, a few things come to mind. One is the obvious: we make a fire.
Yeah.
So I provide the ingredients, and I invite the client to actually build a fire. For some of them, it's their first time.
So you get them to do it,
Yeah, and
or yeah.
I observe how they've done it, and then we look at that. So, as a metaphor to how one works with boundaries elsewhere in life, let's look at the fire. Oh, you've put some stones around the edge, so it's not a trip hazard. There's a clear boundary between sitting area and the fire area, danger area. So that's a healthy example. Some people don't do that, or the boundaries are too close. And it's an instructive exercise to see how
Hmm.
one relates to boundaries. Another exercise is just to practice making requests to each other. So I'll do this, um, for example, with you. I'd say, "Hi, Justin," and you have to say no to my answer.
Okay.
Can we keep talking in this podcast for another 10, 15 minutes?
No.
Can you take off your shirt?
No.
So we just play on that. You get to feel what's it like to say no, even if you wanted to say yes.
That actually did something for me a little bit, even though the second one was pretty absurd,
Yeah,
but it actually did something for me. I realized that maybe I could say no more in my life.
right. You felt it
Yeah.
in your body,
I
maybe.
felt something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's getting used to just that two-letter word. What's it like to say no? What's it like if I slow down and observe it in this game, uh, and override my yes, or really assert my no? And then so we play on that game with swapping it around. Maybe you'd ask me a question. I would say no to everything you ask. And then we'd invert it once more. Every answer must be yes, even if it's a no.
Okay.
So
But
then you're getting used to yes. Okay, this is how my yes feels. Oh, it can be really insightful. I hardly say no, or I say yes too much, or um,
yeah,
yeah.
saying yes is interesting as well because I do say no to a lot of things. Like given that um, I just have a lot of stuff kind of coming into my life. I live in Colombia at the moment, and a lot of local people around me want to get to know me and kind of be a part of what I'm doing. And then being active on social media, there's a lot of stuff flying around, and I get a lot of sort of things that are presented as opportunities to me that I don't see as an opportunity that I'm interested in. but it's very easy to mistake, to dismiss something and say no to it that could potentially be amazing. Like, for example, I was hanging out with a local friend of mine. He calls himself a Caribbean Costeño. He's a little bit different than the other. I live in the Caribbean part of Colombia, and he's a black guy, and his family is from the San Andres Island, which is a little. It's technically part of Colombia, but it's like far away, and it's different. Um, their skin is black, and they're fishermen. And I've been hanging out with him and getting to trust him slowly. And he's like, "Hey, how about we rent a big house together in the little fishing town next to the city I'm in, and we can rent out some rooms on Airbnb, and we can host parties here." And I'm just thinking, no, no, I'm sorry, my friend. I'm really enjoying your friendship, but I'm just going to say no to that. But what if I said yes to that? Like, it would take my life in a completely different direction. And who knows, maybe it would be absolutely wonderful. But I've already kind of decided, no, that's not for me, based on whatever, based on my decision
Mm.
making process. And who knows if I would say yes to something.
Yeah. That reminds me of a tip that I'll give your listeners and I tell my clients, which is knowing your boundary in advance is priceless.
Hmm.
Because in the moment, there's passion, there's flair, there's pressure. For example, if your boundary is you don't want to be intimate with a partner at a party, or a certain level of intimacy is your boundary, to communicate that, get clear on yourself and communicate it in advance is much easier than in the heat of the moment while you're making out to say, oh, actually, there was no sex on the table tonight. In the moment, you're going to want to have sex.
Yeah.
So to know it up front and communicate it is a game changer.
Yeah, but how can you, like, we can be certain about what we think we know and where we stand, but by changing our thinking, we change our lives. And the limitations that we're experiencing in our lives, um, maybe in terms of our health, our wealth, our relationships, whatever it may be, are indications of sort of like the quality of our decision making, maybe in some ways. And so, as we're navigating through life and saying yes or no to things,
Mm.
maybe if we were just saying, doing that decision making process a little bit differently, we would end up with very different results.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I
Like,
think the main thing is being clear who I am, and we use the phrase, "Do you do it on purpose?"
do you do it
I
on
didn't do it
purpose?
on purpose, is what a child might say. It wasn't on purpose.
Yeah.
That word "purpose" is an important word. It talks about intentionality, clarity, direction. What is your life purpose? So to be a man who is on purpose means that he gives due thought and preparation about his boundaries. On purpose, he lights a fire. And there are places where on purpose, he says, there's no fire there. That's a no-go area. I'm cutting that off. I'm letting that one go.
Hmm.
And I think, yeah, all of these things are linked to that core thing of who am I? So I know then how to shape up my life in all those areas:
Yeah.
money, romance, lifestyle, health, nutrition. This is who I am. I want to be a man who's healthy. So I will say yes to that diet and no to some of those things that I used to like eating.
Yeah. I think it's about being self assured, and I might not have all the answers, but I still trust myself,
Hmm.
even if maybe I'm flawed, or it's impossible to be. There's no such thing as perfect, but I still I still trust myself. I still see myself as my own source of wisdom, and I know myself, and I know my yeses and nos, and I'm open to evolving my thinking, my decision making process,
Mm,
but it is where it is, and I believe in it, and I trust
mm.
myself.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful emphasis and really important, Justin, because yes, I talk about clarity. This is the masculine pole, but as a human, I need the feminine skill set as well, which is in the moment, I might dance, I might change my mind. It's okay to change your mind. But the important, essential ingredient is to pause, take stock. Do I want to change my mind? What's going on? What's fueling this moment? And then, yeah, pivot. By all means, pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And of
Pivot.
course, we'll make mistakes
Pivots are
along the
good.
way. We'll make mistakes along the way. That is part of life. But prepare what you can. And in the moment, you might need to change.
Yeah, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
What's it called? What do they call it in football? An audible. You might need to call an audible. That's an American thing.
Yeah, I don't know it.
Yeah, it's like, in football they've got this like big, like they've got all the plays, and the coach
Mm,
will talk to the quarterback, and they've got it all planned out. But every now and then the quarterback will just assess the moment and go off
mm,
script and do it
mm.
do it maybe throw the ball to the left instead of the right. I think they call
Yeah.
that an audible. Sometimes we need to do an audible in life.
And I think that's a lot where magic can happen. A lot of excitement, because in its worst form, that linear clarity that the masculine brings can be really boring and predictable.
Yeah, being
But
open to.
I want the flair and the creativity and the dynamism that my feminine can also bring, to bring this wonderful piece of art, or just, wow, didn't know that existed.
the
Boom, I've
spon-
just
the,
birthed
spon-
something.
the spontaneity.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Spontaneity is beautiful.
Now, Justin, on the topic of boundaries, coming up to the hour mark, I've got people coming to the house probably in the
Yeah.
next 5 or 10 minutes. So
Okay.
I don't want
Yeah.
to interrupt the call.
Oh, geez, whoa. Did
Justin has frozen. If you're still listening, thank you for being here. And I hope you enjoyed the chat. Get in touch if you want to talk to me or Justin, find out more about these themes. I am on Instagram, SamAdams_wildman, or my new website, samueladams.co.uk. Love to connect and explore these things, debate these things, invite me to your podcast or your event, and we can speak further.